Divine rise, blessed be to your day. Divine rise, blessed be to your day. Started this at 10:10, so you know we gotta tune into that. The aspects of ourselves. I had a brief thought while I was working out, getting my workout on, and it made me really think about some things. You know, I love thinking about some things and bringing it to you guys as we're going deeper and deeper into our works. One of the biggest things that we always think about is through comfort, we try to preserve, we try to preserve what we think is our personality. A while back, somebody asked me a question. Somebody asked me a question. They were like, but what about your personality? And I gave him an answer at that point in time, but after I thought about it, and now I came back to that question, and it revolved, I was thinking about my life and how much of my life was fillers and cues. Fillers and cues. Do you have that personality, that personal medium, that personal aspect of yourself that helps you navigate through your day? Or are you only the social cues and the fillers that keep you in that behavior, that reaction? We talked about that. We got deep into the aspects on Friday of submitting to the soul, understand what submission really is, getting really deep into what submission really is versus dismissing. A lot of us, based on social cues, based on fillers, we avoid, this is all through the avoidance, we'll tend to stay within these aspects to preserve our comfort, to keep us acting a certain way, to keep us moving a certain way, walking, talking drones. Basically, that's basically what we, based in the social cues and the fillers that keep our day going, to keep us into certain behavior, we search for that. That was one of the biggest things that I searched for when it came to me really understanding myself and really seeing that I really didn't have a personality. A lot of us don't understand, and we got to accept that really don't have a personality. I really didn't have a personal medium. I really didn't have a personal space. I.e., everything around me and my opportunity, everything that was in my space that was based on the opportunity for me to continue in a certain line of behaviors. Everything in my space was based in me staying or acting a certain way. So I'm going to ask the question one more time. Do you really have a personality, or are you just simply the social cues and the fillers to keep you behaving the way that you behave? Fillers and social cues. A lot of us don't understand this because it's based in attachment. It's based in your attachments. It's based in you staying a certain way. It's based in you acting a certain way. It's based on you, a lot of the times for myself, just even thinking in that, a lot of the things that I was doing was just to maintain a certain level of projection. When you're stuck within the social cue, when you're stuck within the filler, that the aspects of the outside looks really, really nice, but the inside is all gray and bland, that's your true self. Outside of, remember, true love of yourself is outside of the attachments. So when I look at myself now as compared to 6-7 years ago, it's a very different energy. I'm actually inside of my energy. I'm actually able to assess more. But the first levels of our assessment is assessing the social cues. Remember, your society is your environment. Your society is your environment. How you behave is based on your society or based on your environment. Your environment is created as within, as without, based on the things that you have not dealt with. So a lot of times, one of our social cues for us is our environment matches, and I made that post yesterday, it gives us this aspect into ourselves of everything in my space I live vicariously through, based on the same narrative that I gave myself as my filler. A lot of times we keep that filler going. We keep that social cue going only so we can remain comfortable. One of the biggest things with that is how many of your conversations are, when you leave a certain conversation, how do you feel after a conversation? Remember, everything reflects the conversation you have with yourself. So if I'm in a conversation, I'm having a conversation with myself, start my conversation off with my dad. I've talked about that before, talking about like, similar to my grandmother waking up at 5 a.m., 4 a.m., I'm carrying on that reasoning why, because we're tapping into that energy. That's that tapping into your ancestor, tapping into yourself. So now I set the pace and the tone of my day. You'll be able to tell when you're reacting to social cues by the level of distraction, that goes on throughout your day. Are you forgetful a lot? Do you forget a lot of things? Do you have a hard time trying to adjust to something new? Are you forgetful a lot? Do you have a problem trying to adjust to things? Adjust to something new? Do you have a issue with change? Do you have an issue with actually becoming informed? These are the types of questions that you ask yourself to really see what your personality is. Because your personality is not your job. Your personality is not your friends, your family. That's not your personality. That's the paranormal scope or the aspects that you use to stay within that physical form. That have that physical form. But as you're now coming into yourself and you're learning yourself, you're assessing that I no longer want to preserve being comfortable. A lot of the times when we come into our healing process with ourselves, we're working on ourselves, we're coming into this healing process. One of the biggest things that we have to challenge is everything must go. You got to treat your healing like an everything must go sale, and there's no bargaining on the price. You got to treat your healing similar to a everything must go sale. It's a closeout sale, and you cannot negotiate the price. Let the value be set based on the behavior that it brings. A lot of the times we have a problem accepting that. I had a lot of times accepting it was my behavior that set me up to fall. It was my behavior. It was my reaction. It was me not listening. It was me not listening to that inner voice inside of me. I wasn't listening to the inner voice. Instead, I was appeasing it based on the emotional aspect that I was stuck in. I was stuck in that emotional algorithm of anger and sorrow and pain. So this is what happened when I needed that fix, that urge to be fixed, to stay angry. Instead of me being in a space where it was my anger was being addressed. Why are you so angry, Carlos? Why are you so angry? Man, because I'm angry because of this, and this. I didn't give myself the chance to be like, really voice what I really was upset about. The things that I really dealt with. Some of the times I didn't even know why. Because I allowed so many things to be built onto that identity. I allowed so many safeties to be created on top of that identity. I got so many things outside of that identity. I was similar to a homeless man on the corner holding up a sign saying, "We'll work for food." A lot of us, this is the personality complex that we gather with. I'll be happy if you feed me. I'll be happy if you just accept me for how I am and understand that every time that you're going to bring up this conversation you're really having with yourself. Every time that you bring it up, I want you to accept. This is when you're coming into acceptance and we think that it's a vulnerability, but it's actually dismissal. I talked about this on Friday, and it's actually dismissal. I'm going to always, in this space, every time you bring it up, I'm always going to address something that has nothing to do with it. I'm always going to address the past or future. I'm always going to address my behavior based in time. I'm always going to address my behavior based in time. How I got to this point, and I want to stay comfortable in this point, so I need something else to fill this space so I can continue acting the way that I'm acting. You got to get out of that comfort. You got to get uncomfortable with yourself. You got to be able to look at yourself like, God damn, I really need to tap into myself. Because when you acknowledge it in that I am, that precursor of that I am, I'm never going to change. I'm never going to find love again. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to trust. I'm never going to do this. I'm never going to do that. Negative self-talk that you're projecting, you're activating, because remember, when you're thinking, you're listening. So when you speak that invoke that incantation that I am never going to do this, or I'm never going to do that. Guess what happens? You don't only activate, this shadow work part 2. You don't only activate the energy of your current, but you activate the energy in every space. And we're going to get into this on Friday. In every space that came before that. So the time that your great grandma said something or was angry at this time that your great grandmother got upset at your great grandfather because he didn't step up to the plate because of his emotional trauma, and she said, in her mind, she said, I'm never going to trust another nigga again. That's the energy you tapping into. That one time that your great grandfather said no to your grandmother, based on that aspect of that behavior that was unchecked, staying in that same space, that's the energy you tapping into. That's why it gets so heavy at times when you acknowledge that you have to change it. When you acknowledge that you're changing, when you acknowledge that you're investing into you growing and coming into yourself, you're acknowledging at the same time every timeline that came before that you existed. Because remember when I made a post talking about the womb, and every egg that's inside of you was present when you were in your mother, was present when you was in your great grandmother, was present when you was in your great grandmother. And I'm talking about the womb. That's not on that's not just on the women aspect. That's the masculine and the feminine, because we both have wombs. We both have wombs because we all, in that autonomous sense of how we create. Think about what you're creating. Every time that you speak something, you're either speaking that gift or that curse to yourself. So if I sat here, I remember when I used to say, yo, man, I'm never trusting any woman. I'm not trusting this, and this, and this, and this. And then one of the biggest examples for me was listening to a Jay-Z album when he said that shit in Big Pimpin'. And then now listening to the 444 album, which is his album about his shadow work. I'm like, damn, that was my change. I can see in my environment as I accept change, unbiased, because if you accepting it through the bias, you stuck within that fundamental, therefore you're only going to look at it on one side. You're going to avoid the wound. And 9 times out of 10, you will avoid the wound. That means looking at Jay, and I remember when he wrote the book Decoded, I don't even know why I got the book Decoded. Went to the library, was in there, got it, read it, excellent book at the point in time when it came out back in like 2007, 8, 9, 11. I can't remember when I even got the damn book. But I was like, this is a book. So I can look back and I can look at this imagery that I used. I can see everything in my space based on what it was actually there for. Removing myself from needing to react to social cues, leaving myself to stop reacting to the filler, because every time I reacted to a social cue, I needed filler to maintain that behavior. When we're stuck in these social cues, you need filler to maintain that behavior. So thinking about it from the complex of you a real nigga, you a bad bitch, you an independent woman, you on top of you a high valued ass nigga. Okay, cool. That's a social cue. If you have not defined that within inside of yourself and using it to define yourself in truth to yourself and doing that internal work, it's only a social cue. That means you're gonna need filler to keep that going like that. So now naturally in your space, is when you start thinking about your space and your environment, how you create your social cue. So you're sitting here saying you're a high valued individual based on you maintaining necessities. But now everything in your space vicariously lives through you. In order for you to maintain that social cue, everything around you got to be lazy. This is how you create your space based on positive and negatives. Remember, everything's a positive and a negative. So if I have the knowledge and I'm being guided by this negative aspect of my emotion, that means I need something positive or the masculine archetype to say that I know this is why. And if I'm not doing that in the other aspect, if I need to feed from that aspect in what I know, now I need the feminine aspect or the emotional aspect, that emotional cue, that filler, to maintain my behavior so it can guide my behavior. This is when you get into your work of yourself. It's deeper than just you understanding that where you at right now and I need to go forward. What do you need to go forward into? You got to accept that everything is going to change. And accepting that everything is going to change, now you come into that space and you're like, oh, I see why this lesson keeps coming up. Every time that I come to this lesson, I always hold back. I don't say what I need to say in that space. Because I'm still in fear of something. If I say that, then they're going to look at me like I'm crazy. They're going to say that I'm the devil. They're going to say that I'm stuck up. They're going to say that I've changed. And I don't have an answer to it. I didn't do all this work to stay the same. This is what you got to tell yourself, being gentle with yourself. You didn't do all this work to stay the same. You're not doing all of this to keep the same thing going and you repeating every year the same aspects. You didn't do that for that. When you're really doing this work, you're not doing it for that. This is you becoming the best version of yourself. If they're on that frequency or they want that frequency, you become the example of that frequency, i.e. that emotion. You become the example of that frequency, i.e. that emotion. That the frequency is the vibration. Remember that. Your emotions are the vibration that you're on. Your frequency is the observing at that space. So if you want to be peace, you gotta deal with those internal conflicts. Or else you're always gonna be searching outside of yourself for peace. If you're looking for that love that you've always desired, not in the example of, not outside of the example of the love of your mother, what's the definition of a mother? Do that for yourself. What's the definition of a father? Tap into that for yourself. And I guarantee you, when you're working with me, once we tap into that, what you define, that love aspect, you'll see that a behavior in the timeline, that karmic loop, that stopped them from being able to do it. You'll see when you spoke the incantation of I'm never going to do this and what they had to invoke in order to do that. You'll see it exactly for what it is. You'll be able to accept that acknowledgement, that acceptance, that true apology. A lot of us accept. I remember accepting shallow ass apologies where we would address the anger or address what happened, and then because I was only used to the social cue, the filler would be, let's talk about this, or let's talk about this current event, or let's go talk about this person, or did you hear about this? And we would pick up where we left off, filling up this space with something that really didn't do anything. So then when I started dealing with myself, I really started looking at those conversations differently. Because when I really started the apology process with myself and understanding apology, the only true apology is change behavior. when I started changing my behavior, and I realized why I was over apologizing, because I didn't understand what an apology was. This is your unlearning and relearning. I didn't know what an apology was. The only things that I saw based in an apology was if my mom and pops got into an argument, then later on he come back from work because he worked at a nursery and he went and planted her some rose bushes. But since he didn't go in there and openly express this because he didn't have that nurturing aspect from his mother, my mom didn't understand how to accept it. And vice versa. This is your process of peeling back those layers. You got to start getting into those conversations that are making you uncomfortable. You have a chance that every time you go into a space, remember when that emotion runs high and it's a volatile energy in that cocktail of mix, you got a choice of how you're going to take that energy and use it. Are you going to use it to remain comfortable? Or are you going to actually challenge that space? Some of us are really afraid to let go of certain aspects because we don't know what's over there. But you're not finding anything over there. You're going to create it over there. When you tap into yourself, you'll realize that everything is already there. The abundance and prosperity, you got to create the conduit. But you got to address what's already in that space. You're already abundant. I've said this before. You're already abundant. But what are you abundant in now? You're already prosperous. But what are you prosperous in now? You're already wealthy. But what are you wealthy in right now? You got to address those aspects first. A lot of us are abundant in trauma bonds. Don't even realize it. When I acknowledged I was abundant in trauma bonds and everybody around me was bonded based on trauma, and I addressed that, it got really, really empty. It got really, really empty. But now I'm in the space where it's like, ooh, I'm over here now. Now I can actually build in my abundance. This is you tapping into that aspect of yourself. This is you learning yourself. Nobody else can make you learn you. I'm only a vessel. I only can use the interpretations of what I learned in the different layers and the experiences and whatever is channeled and download, because me honoring that thought. And that's what I provide to you. Everything from the shadow work consultation, furthering therapy, readings, human design analysis. You hit me in the inbox. Even with a spiritual advisory, I do spiritual advisory to that aspect, coaching on that aspect, furthering going ahead, do all of that. GODicalAlchemistLLC.com, or hit me in the inbox or hit me in the DM. This week on the God Hour podcast, we'll be getting into paranormal scope, the voices of the inner child, the haunting or the multiple aspects that our inner voice speaks through, that possessive content, that means everything in your space you're trying to hold on to because you're trying to possess the definition or the identity to it to maintain. And yeah, in the weekly reading, I want you to be the best. I desire you to be the best. Only way to tap into being the best, be real honest with yourself. I love you. We love us. Ashe.